Morning, guys. It's Mr. Cram. That is some strong coffee. I'm excited to read today because George mixed up his medicine. You remember? He was at the stove. He turned it on to a boil, and he kind of started to do this like a chant. He really got into it. I'm going to read that one more time just because it's kind of fun. Fiery broth and witch's brew, foamy froth and riches blue, fume and spume and spoondrift spray, fizzle swizzle, shout hooray. Watch it sloshing, swashing, splashing, hear it hissing, squishing, spizzing, grandma better start to pray. He's dancing around, he's getting the stuff ready, and now it's, I think, time for grandma's, 11 o'clock medicine. So, again, the questions in my head as reader, will she fall for it, and what will happen if she does, and what will happen if she doesn't? Or really, I want to know what's going to happen. Alright, so now it's called brown paint. Huh. Okay. George turned off the heat under the stewing pot. He must leave plenty of time for it to cool down. It's a good call. If he brought her a steaming hot spoonful of medicine, she might be suspicious. When all the steam and froth had gone away, he peered into the giant pot to see what color the great medicine now was. It was a deep and brilliant blue. It needs more brown in it, George said. It simply must be brown, or she'll get suspicious. And George ran outside and dashed into his father's tool shed, where all the paints were kept. There was a row of cans on the shelf, all colors, black, green, red, pink, white, and brown. He reached for the can of brown. The label simply said dark brown gloss paint, 1 quart. He took a screwdriver and pried off the lid. The can was 3/4 full. He rushed it back to the kitchen. He poured the whole lot of it into the pot. The pot was now full to the brim. Very gently, George stirred the paint into the mixture with the long wooden spoon. Aha! It was all turning brown. A lovely, rich, creamy brown. "Where's that medicine of mine, boy?" came the voice from the living room. "You're forgetting me. You're doing it on purpose. I shall tell your mother." "I'm not forgetting you, Grandma," George called back. "I'm thinking of you all the time." "It's true. But there's still 10 minutes to go." "You're a nasty little maggot," the voice screeched. "You're a lazy and disobedient little worm, and you're growing too fast." George fetched the bottle of Grandma's real medicine from the sideboard. He took out the cork and tipped it all down the sink. He then filled the bottle with his own magic mixture by dipping a small jug into the pot and using it as a pourer. He replaced the cork. Had it cooled down enough yet? Not quite. He held the bottle under the cold tap water for a couple of minutes. The label came off in the water, but it didn't matter. He dried the bottle with the dishcloth. All was now ready. This was it. The great moment had arrived. "Medicine time, Sorry, that almost sounded like her voice. "Medicine time, Grandma," he called out. "I should hope so, too," came the grumpy reply. The silver tablespoon in which the medicine was always given lay ready on the kitchen sideboard. George picked it up. Holding the spoon in one hand and the bottle in the other, he advanced into the living room. I think that's the end of that chapter. Let me see how long this next one is. Because the next one is literally called Grandma Gets the Medicine, and that's kind of where I want to get to. All right, you know what? I'm going to do it. Grandma Gets the Medicine. Strap in. Here we go. It also kind of answers my prediction, doesn't it? I was wondering if she would actually, eat the medicine. And according to the title, she gets it, so I assume she does. Grandma sat hunched in her chair by the window. The wicked little eyes followed George closely as he crossed the room toward her. "You're late," she snapped. "I don't think I am, Grandma." Don't interrupt me in the middle of a sentence, she shouted. Sorry. But you finished your sentence, Grandma. There you go again, she cried, always interrupting and arguing. You really are a tiresome little boy. What's the time? It's exactly 11 o'clock, Grandma. You're lying as usual. Stop talking so much and give me my medicine. Shake the bottle first. Then pour it onto the spoon and make sure it's a whole spoonful. Are you going to gulp it down in one go? George asked her, or will you sip it? What I do is none of your business, the old woman said. Fill the spoon. As George removed the cork and began very slowly to pour the thick brown stuff into the spoon, he couldn't help thinking back on all the mad and marvelous things that had gone into the making of this crazy stuff. Shaving cream, hair remover, dandruff cure, automatic washing machine powder, flea powder for dogs, shoe polish, black pepper, horseradish sauce, and the rest of them. Not to mention the powerful animal pills and powders and liquids, and the brown paint. Open your mouth wide, Grandma, he said, and I'll pop it in. The old hag opened her mouth and showed her disgusting pale brown teeth. Here we go, George cried out. Swallow it down. He pushed the spoon well into her mouth and tipped the mixture down her throat. Then he stepped back to watch the results. It was worth watching. Grandma yelled, "Owie!" and her whole body shot up, whoosh, into the air. This is awesome. It was exactly as though someone had pushed an electric wire through the underneath of her chair and switched on the current. Up she went like a jack-in-the-box, and she didn't come down. She stayed there, suspended in midair, about 2 feet up, still in a quivering position, but rigid now. I'm sorry. Still in a sitting position, but rigid now, frozen, quivering, the eyes bulging, the hair standing straight up on end. Is something wrong, Grandma? George asked her politely. Are you all right? That's a hilarious question. She's literally floating 2 feet above her chair and her hair standing straight up, right? And he asks, are you all right? Like this is normal. Oh boy. Suspended up there in space, the old girl was beyond speaking. The shock that George's marvelous mixture had given her must have been tremendous. You'd have thought she swallowed a red-hot poker the way she took off from that chair. Then down she came again with a plop, back into her seat. Call the fire department! She shouted suddenly. My stomach's on fire! Well, it's just the medicine, Grandma, George said. It's good, strong stuff. Fire! The old woman yelled. Fire in the basement! Get a bucket! Man the hoses! Do something quick! Cool it, Grandma, George said. But he got a bit of a shock when he saw the smoke coming out of her mouth and out of her nostrils. Clouds of black smoke were coming out of her nose and blowing around the room. By golly, you really are on fire, George said. Of course I'm on fire, she yelled. I'll be burned to a crisp. I'll be fried to a fizzle. I'll be boiled like a beetroot. George ran into the kitchen and came back with a jug of water. Open your mouth, Grandma, he cried. He could hardly see her for the smoke, but he managed to pour half a jugful down her throat, a sizzling sound, the kind you get if you hold a hot frying pan under cold water, came up from deep down in Grandma's stomach. The old hag bucked and shied and snorted. She gasped and gurgled. Spouts of water came shooting out of her, and the smoke cleared away. Well, the fire's out, George announced proudly. You'll be all right now, Grandma. All right, she yelled. Who ooze all right. There's Jackie jumpers in my tummy. There's squigglers in my belly. There's bangers in my bottom. She began bouncing up and down in her chair. Quite obviously, she was not very comfortable. You'll find it's doing a lot of good for you, that medicine, Grandma, George said. Good? She screamed. Doing me good. It's killing me. Then she began to bulge. She was swelling. She was puffing up all over. Someone was pumping her up. That's how it looked. Was she going to explode? Her face was turning from purple to green. That ain't good. But wait. She had a puncture somewhere. George could hear the hiss of escaping air. She stopped swelling. She was going down. She was slowly getting thinner again, shrinking back and back slowly to her shrivelly old self. How are things, Grandma? George said. No answer. Then a funny thing happened. Grandma's body gave a sudden sharp twist and a sudden sharp jerk, and she flipped herself clear out of her chair and landed neatly on her 2 feet on the carpet. That's terrific, Grandma, cried George. You haven't stood up like that for years. Look at you. You're standing up all on your own, and you're not even using a stick. Grandma didn't even hear him. The frozen, pop-eyed look was back with her again now. She was miles away in another world. That's the frozen, pop-eyed look. When the author says she's miles away in another world, clearly like her mind, her thinking, her thoughts are somewhere else. Marvelous medicine, George told himself. He found it fascinating to stand there watching what it was doing to the old hag. What next, he wondered. Well, he soon found out. Suddenly she began to grow. It was quite slow at first, just a very gradual inching upward, up, inch by inch, getting taller and taller, about an inch every few seconds. And in the beginning, George didn't notice it. But when she had passed the 5'6" mark and was going up on being 6 feet tall, George gave a jump and shouted, Hey, Grandma, you're growing! You're growing up! Hang on, Grandma! You better stop now or you'll be hitting the ceiling! It's funny because remember, she told George that growing was a bad thing, and now she's growing extremely fast. It was truly a fantastic sight, this ancient, scrawny old woman getting taller and taller, longer and longer, thinner and thinner, as though she were a piece of elastic being pulled upward by an invisible hand. When the top of her head actually touched the ceiling, George thought she was bound to stop. But she didn't. There was a sort of scrunching noise, and bits of plaster and cement came raining down. Hadn't you better stop now, Grandma? George said. Daddy just had this whole room repainted. But there was no stopping her now. Soon her head and shoulders had completely disappeared through the ceiling, and she was still going. George dashed upstairs to his own bedroom, and there she was, coming up through the floor like a mushroom. You guys see that all right? Is it? No. Yeah, right there. Okay, sorry. Ooh, this ain't good. Whoopee! She shouted, finding her voice at last. Hallelujah! Here I come! Steady, Grandma, George said. With a hiney nonny no, up we go! She shouted. Just watch me grow! Well, this is my room, George said. Look at the mess you're making. Terrific medicine! She cried. Give me some more! It's unexpected. She's dotty as a donut, George thought. Come on, boy, give me some more, she yelled. Dish it out. I'm slowing down. She's asking for more of this stuff. I wonder if George planned on her actually liking it? George was still clutching the medicine bottle in one hand and a spoon in the other. Oh, well, he thought, why not? He poured out a second dose and popped it into her mouth. Whee! She screamed, and up she went again. Her feet were still on the floor downstairs in the living room, but her head was moving quickly toward the ceiling of the bedroom. I'm on my way now, boy, she called down to George. Just watch me go. That's the attic above you, Grandma, George called out. I'd keep out of there. It's full of bugs and boggles. Crash! The old girl's head went through the ceiling as though it were butter. See, there's poor George. This is just a mess. George stood in his bedroom, gazing at the shambles. There was a big hole in the floor and another in the ceiling, and sticking up like a post between the two was the middle part of Grandma. Her legs were in the room below. Her head was above in the attic. I'm still going, came the screechy old voice from above. Give me another dose, boy, and let me go through the roof. No, Grandma, no, George called back. You're busting up the whole house. To heck with the house, she shouted. I want some fresh air. I haven't been outside for 20 years. By golly, she is going through the roof, George told himself. He ran downstairs. He rushed out the back door into the yard. It would be simply awful, he thought, if she bashed up the roof as well. His father would be furious, and he, George, would get the blame. He had made the medicine. He had given her too much. Don't come through the roof, Grandma, he prayed. Please don't. That ends our chapter. The next chapter is called The Brown Hen. Yeah, the questions about that. Well, the results of the medicine were interesting, no doubt. I guess I'm a little surprised that she ended up liking the medicine, right? I mean, she's blasting through the roof. She's growing as tall as a giant. And she's asking for more. Poor George, I think he's in over his head now. He wanted to give her a kick in the pants, right? Well, and now he's got, like, I'm assuming a 20-foot tall grandma and then a broken house. He's going to have to explain this all to his dad. So, George has some problems to solve. But usually any book, usually has problems to solve. Makes it interesting. Now we have a problem of a very, very, very tall, very evil grandmother. Okay, very good. I'll be back tomorrow to read some more. Thank you guys for tuning in, and enjoy your rainy day. I'll look forward to hanging out with you guys tomorrow.